Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of marble pillars and candlelit villas where power wasn't just written in laws or carved into stone, but whispered in bedrooms and shouted in the arenas. You're standing in the heart of ancient Rome where the streets smell faintly of wine, sweat, and something far more dangerous. Here, desire is currency, and the most dangerous games aren't played with swords, but with the human body. Behind every banquet, curtain, and temple door, there are rituals so intimate and so calculated, they could make even the bravest gladiator flinch. You think you could handle it, but honestly, you probably wouldn't survive the first night. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The marble under your sandals is cool, polished by generations of feet, senators, merchants, slaves, courtesans. The air hums with the sound of lyres and chatter from the forum, but you've been invited somewhere. Private. A domus, the home of a wealthy patrician, its courtyard alive with torchlight. At first glance, it's all elegance, fountains trickling into pools, mosaics of gods and heroes staring up from the floor. But if you follow the host's subtle nod, you'll find yourself guided past respectable dining halls into rooms where incense clings heavy and the laughter is different. This is the Rome they don't put on coins, the Rome of whispered invitations and careful performances. In one chamber, women in translucent stolae and men draped in silk recline together, their eyes watching new arrivals the way a cat watches a mouse. On low tables, bowls of figs and honey-glazed dates sit beside small clay jars filled with oils, their scents thick jasmine, myrrh, cinnamon, musk. A slave boy kneels quietly pouring wine so dark it could be mistaken for blood into cups chased with gold. You hear your name. A woman with hair pinned in the elaborate style of an empress beckons you forward. She's older than you expect, but her smile is sharp, and you realize quickly she's not here for romance, she's here for power. In Rome, seduction was often less about attraction and more about leverage. A senator's mistress could ruin a rival's career with a single rumor planted over an intimate meal. An affair with the wrong person might mean a dagger in the dark, or worse, exile to a barren island where the only sound is the wind. The games begin subtly. Someone draws you into a circle where the guests speak in riddles, each answer a dare. The penalties for refusal are not mild. Sometimes it's a kiss. Sometimes it's the removal of another piece of clothing. Sometimes it's something whispered in your ear that makes your skin crawl. But you notice that every movement is being watched. In this room, nothing is accidental. The spilled drop of wine, the brush of a hand, the way someone leans too close while pretending to listen. Every gesture could be a message, a trap, or an invitation. Outside, the city's public face is no less complex. The baths open to nearly everyone are as much a social marketplace as the forum. Pools of varying temperatures steam under the painted ceilings, and it's here that senators might conduct business while watching slaves oil the backs of young men or matrons gossip as they're massaged with perfumed salves. For some, the baths are about hygiene. For others, they're a theater of bodies, a place where alliances are forged in whispers and sealed in shared secrets. And then there are the festivals. Saturnalia, for instance, where the roles of master and slave are reversed for a day, and inhibitions dissolve faster than snow in the Tiber. The streets flood with drunken laughter, dice games, and masked strangers pressing close. You might think it's just harmless fun, but the anonymity is dangerous. Debts are settled. Grudges played out sometimes under the guise of passion. Rome's pleasure wasn't always about mutual enjoyment. It was about spectacle, dominance, and the thrill of crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. But the most unsettling practices aren't public. They're hidden in the rituals of certain cults. Some, like the cult of Bacchus, were accused by the Senate of orgiastic rites so wild they threatened the moral order of the Republic. The stories, half propaganda, half truth, speak of torchlit gatherings in forests of wine flowing until speech slurs of masks, hiding faces as strangers become partners. You wonder if it was fear of immorality that made the Senate crack down, or fear of the bonds formed in such intimate chaos. In the palaces, emperors themselves set the tone. Caligula Nero, names that still drip with scandal centuries later, were said to use feasts as stages for their personal indulgences, inviting nobles to watch or participate in acts designed to shock and humiliate. To be chosen might mean favor, wealth, even survival, but it could also mean you were marked forever, your reputation twisted beyond repair. You realize that in this city, sex is never just sex. It's politics, it's currency, it's warfare without swords. And you standing here are already being evaluated. Your posture, your glance, the way your breath catches when the silk of someone's robe brushes your hand. If you show too much interest, you could be branded easy prey. Too little, and you could insult someone whose grudge might cost you your life. Somewhere deep in the house, you hear music shift slower now, more deliberate. The guests begin moving toward a larger chamber. You follow, though your instincts whisper caution. Inside the room is lit by 100 candles, their flames reflected in polished bronze mirrors. Cushions spill across the floor, and at the far end, a dais holds a carved ivory couch where the host reclines, smiling faintly. You feel every eye turn toward you. And just like that, you understand here in Rome, the most dangerous games are the ones where the rules are never spoken, but everyone knows when you've lost. The host gestures languidly, and a servant steps forward carrying a silver tray laden with small, strange-looking objects, some carved from ivory, some shaped from polished bronze, others crafted from wood, darkened with age. Each is an artifact, an implement, a piece of a ritual older than the empire itself. The murmurs ripple through the crowd, because each guest knows what this is. The evening's entertainment is about to begin, and it's a performance where participation is not optional. You feel the cushions sink beneath you as you're guided to sit among strangers whose faces are partially hidden by gilded masks. The masks are more than decoration, they grant permission. In Rome, anonymity could be a shield, but it could also be a weapon. A person might indulge in behavior they'd never risk in daylight, their identity hidden yet. The right eyes could still guess the truth from a voice, a gesture, a single revealing habit. The host's voice drifts over the room, smooth and measured. He speaks of Venus, goddess of love, and Mars, god of war, of the eternal dance between desire and conquest. He tells of how the founders of Rome descended from a line touched by divine passion and divine violence alike. It's a reminder not so subtle that in this society, pleasure and power share the same breath. The guests lean closer, as if he's unveiling a secret, when in truth, every person here already knows it. A pair of dancers enters the chamber, moving in slow, deliberate steps to the sound of pipes and drums. Their bodies are painted in swirling patterns, and they move in perfect unison, mimicking scenes from myth. The crowd is rapt because in these movements, the Romans see reflections of their own lives, the seduction of the lover, the triumph of the victor, the humiliation of the conquered. No story is purely erotic or purely violent. It is both intertwined like the strands of a laurel wreath. You notice the servants weaving through the cushions, again, refilling cups with spiced wine. The air grows warmer, the flicker of the candle flames making the room seem alive, breathing. A man to your left leans in and murmurs something in Latin, his voice too low for anyone else to hear. You catch the words mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors, a phrase that in Rome justifies almost anything. To him, perhaps this gathering is tradition, an echo of rituals stretching back to the city's earliest days. But to you, it feels like a carefully choreographed trap. The host claps once and the dancers stop. Another servant brings forward a small lidded jar. It's opened and an unmistakable heady aroma drifts out, something resinous, musky, laced with an undercurrent that makes your pulse quicken despite yourself. Incense was not just for temples. In private gatherings, certain blends were believed to awaken desires or dull inhibitions. You see people breathing deeply, eyes half-lidded, and realize this is more than performance. It's chemical persuasion. Suddenly, the masked man beside you presses a small, carved token into your hand. It's cool, smooth, and shaped like a miniature phallus, common in Rome, where symbols of fertility and virility hung in doorways around necks, even sewn into clothing. But here, the token has a different meaning. In certain circles, such an object could be an invitation to follow someone into a side chamber, where what happens will never be spoken of publicly. You're not sure if refusing is safer than accepting. In the far corner, two men in rich tunics whisper to one another while watching the crowd. They are clearly not here for the simple thrill of the evening. They're here to see who responds to who hesitates, who indulges. In the political climate of Rome, such observations could be turned into leverage. Tomorrow in the Senate or the Forum, a well-timed remark about last night's activities could bend an enemy's will or silence a critic. You begin to understand why these gatherings were as feared as they were desired. The risk was intoxicating, the knowledge that one could rise or be destroyed based on a single choice made under candlelight. It was a theater without script where your reputation was the prize and the forfeit. Then the doors open again, and this time it's not dancers who enter, but musicians and attendants carrying trays of food, platters of roasted game birds dripping with honey, bowls of oysters swimming in herbs, pyramids of fresh figs and grapes. The scent is overwhelming. And yet it's clear the feast is not really about eating. In Rome, the connection between appetite for food and appetite for flesh was more than metaphor. They believed indulgence in one naturally stoked the other. Guests feed one another morsels, fingers, lingering lips, brushing fingertips. You watch as the host rises from his couch, a signal that the night is shifting into its next phase. His robe slips from one shoulder, deliberately revealing a golden torque at his neck, a symbol of conquest taken from a defeated enemy, worn now as a personal ornament. The message is clear here: even pleasure is a form of victory. The guests begin to move not in a rush, but with the practiced ease of people who know exactly where they wish to be and with whom. Some disappear into alcoves draped with heavy curtains. Others stay in the main chamber where cushions and low couches invite lounging conversations that may turn into something far less innocent. Everywhere you see the same interplay of glances and touches, some brazen, others fleeting but unmistakable. You catch your reflection in one of the polished bronze mirrors along the wall. Your face is flushed from the wine, and the heat your eyes wider than you'd like to admit. Around you, the atmosphere has changed. It's no longer about watching. It's about deciding whether to be part of the story. In the center of the room, the musicians shift to a slower rhythm. The candles burn lower, casting longer shadows. The conversations are softer now, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter or the sharp intake of breath. The air feels heavier, as though the walls themselves are leaning in to listen. And then, without anyone saying so, you realize you've crossed the threshold. From here, the rules of the outside world don't apply. What happens next will be remembered, misremembered, or deliberately altered in the telling, depending on who stands to gain from it. In Rome, truth was as fluid as wine, and tonight both are flowing freely. You barely notice the moment the musicians stop playing. The silence slips in like a shadow, almost imperceptible, until you realize the entire room has gone still. Every pair of eyes seems to shift toward the host, who now stands in the center of the chamber. His posture is relaxed, but his presence fills the space, commanding attention without a single raised voice. He is about to escalate the night. From behind him, two attendants carry forward a large chest, oak, bound with iron, its surface carved with scenes of lovers, entwined soldiers, marching gods watching from the clouds. The host kneels and unlocks it, revealing a collection of items that draw a murmur from the crowd. They are implements, some familiar, some foreign, brought from the far edges of Rome's empire. There are leather straps from the provinces, carved bone tools from the east, lengths of silk, dyed in impossible colors from beyond the sea. These are not souvenirs, they are instruments for games the guests know too well. A servant moves from guest to guest, allowing each to choose an item. Some take their time, fingers brushing over polished surfaces, as though testing the weight of their choice. Others snatch theirs quickly, confident in what they intend. When the servant reaches you, the chest's contents are a confusing mix of beauty and menace. You select something small, a delicate chain of bronze links light in the hand, but clearly made for more than decoration. The servant gives you a knowing smile before moving on. The host explains the rules, or rather he doesn't. He speaks in vague terms about expression, about trust, about the freedom of the night. In Rome, this was often the way the boundaries were deliberately blurred, leaving each participant to interpret them. But that uncertainty was the point. It meant every decision carried risk. The guests begin pairing off, forming small circles where the air hums with anticipation. Some couples vanish behind the thick curtains at the edges of the room. Others stay in the open, as though daring the onlookers to watch. What strikes you most is not the acts themselves, but the faces' masks now set aside, revealing expressions that are not always of pleasure. Some are calculating, some nervous, others almost predatory. You remember that for many here, this is not about desire. It's about seeing how far someone can be pushed, how much they will surrender, and how much they will endure. You feel a hand at your shoulder, gentle yet insistent. It's the woman who beckoned you earlier, her elaborate hair now slightly loosened, a strand falling against her cheek. She gestures toward one of the curtained alcoves, and the crowd seems to melt around you, giving way, as though this is an expected pairing. The curtain falls behind you, muffling the sounds from the main chamber. Inside, the light is dimmer, the air thick with the scent of wine and warmed skin. She doesn't speak at first, only studies you with a gaze that feels like it's measuring your worth. When she finally moves, it's deliberate, placing your chosen bronze chain on a low table, then stepping closer until you can see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. In Rome, she says quietly, the most dangerous pleasures are the ones that change you. You wonder if she means change your reputation, your alliances, or something deeper. From beyond the curtain, there's a sudden burst of laughter followed by a sharp cry. It's impossible to tell whether it's from joy or pain. The woman's lips curve into a small smile as though she's accustomed to both. She lifts the chain and threads it lightly through her fingers, the links catching the candlelight, and you understand its dual purpose, ornament, and restraint. She doesn't bind you, not yet. Instead, she circles you like a predator gauging the moment to strike. In Rome, restraint was often more intoxicating than the act itself. The anticipation, the uncertainty it could unravel a person's resolve more effectively than any physical act. She knows this. In the main chamber, the music resumes slower than before, almost hypnotic. The rhythm carries through the floor, a steady thrum beneath your feet. You're aware of time passing, though it feels stretched, distorted. Every motion is deliberate now, every breath part of a larger performance. When she finally steps close enough to touch, it's not the chain she uses. It's her hand resting briefly at your throat, just enough to feel your pulse jump. She leans in her voice, a whisper against your ear. Now you understand why no one speaks of these nights plainly. To name them would ruin their power. Outside the curtain, there's movement, other guests drifting past their shadows, momentarily breaking the light. One pauses as if listening. You realize the walls here are not for privacy. They're for illusion. Whatever happens in this space will be known, retold, reshaped into rumor by morning. The woman releases you and steps back, placing the chain back into your hand. Her meaning is clear. Whether you use it or not will decide how the rest of this night, and perhaps your position in this city, unfolds. When you emerge from the alcove, the atmosphere in the main room is different again. The crowd is looser voices, louder laughter, sharper. Some guests are flushed and disheveled. Others look untouched, yet their eyes gleam with the satisfaction of having seen more than they revealed. You realize that participation was only one way to play the game. Observation, too, could be its own form of power. The host raises his cup, signaling a toast. His words are few, but the meaning is unmistakable. The night is far from over, and the most dangerous part is still to come. The toast is short, but it's enough to reset the rhythm of the night. The guests lift their cups, the candlelight catching on gold and silver, the wine inside dark as pomegranate seeds. When you drink, the taste is richer than before, heavier, spiced with something you can't place. Rome was fond of additives in its wine, herbs to sharpen the senses, resins to change the flavor. Even certain aphrodisiacs whispered about in market stalls. Whatever this is, it leaves a faint heat on your tongue, one that spreads slowly downward. The host gestures toward the far end of the room, where the curtains part to reveal another space larger, but dimly lit, the shadows pooling in the corners. Guests begin to drift toward it, their movement unhurried yet purposeful, like a tide drawing you along. You follow curiosity outweighing caution. Inside the room is arranged like a miniature arena. Cushions and low couches line the edges, while the center is left open, save for a raised circular platform just high enough to command attention. Around the walls, niches hold bronze braziers, their coals glowing red, sending up thin trails of smoke scented with frankincense, and something sharper, perhaps cinnamon or asafoetida, both prized in Rome for their stimulating properties. The crowd settles, murmurs fading. The host steps onto the platform, followed by two attendants carrying a large rectangular cloth. They unfurl it for the audience to see. It's painted with a scene of Venus and Mars, not in the idealized poses you've seen in temples, but locked in something far more primal. The image is explicit, the kind that would scandalize in daylight, yet here it draws appreciative nods. The host speaks again, his voice warm and smooth, explaining that what follows is a ludus amoris, a game of love. But as he begins to describe the rules, you notice that none of them involve love as you know it. It's about challenges, about control, about testing the limits of another person's will. There will be competitors willing, or at least appearing to be, and there will be outcomes, and the spectators will judge not on tenderness, but on artistry, dominance, and the skill with which boundaries are danced around or broken. Two pairs of participants are led forward. The first is a man and a woman, dressed in contrasting colors, his tunic deep red, hers pale ivory. They begin with gestures so subtle you almost miss them, the deliberate brushing of fingertips, the slow circling as though in a dance. But the pace quickens, and soon the movements are sharper, almost combative, yet still within the strange, unspoken choreography of the game. The audience reacts in murmurs, the occasional chuckle, even gasps. The second pair is different. Two men, one older one, strikingly young. Their style is less aggressive, more like a contest of patience. The older man makes advances with calculated precision. Each one refused, each refusal, pushing the tension higher. You realize that here in this game, refusal is not an end, but part of the pleasure. It feeds the spectacle. You sense eyes on you. Turning slightly, you find the same masked man from earlier watching closely, as if gauging your reactions. You look away, but it's too late. In Rome, being observed was almost as dangerous as being touched. Observers could take what they saw, every glance, every twitch of the lips, and make it into something else entirely when the tale was told later. The host steps down from the platform, allowing the games to unfold without him. People begin to talk in low voices, wagering on who will win. In truth, there's no victory here except the one defined by the crowd's approval, and that approval is fickle, shifting with each moment. The woman with the elaborate hair appears at your side again, her lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. "You're not used to this," she murmurs, not as a question, but a statement. You admit as much, and she tilts her head, regarding you with something between pity and intrigue. Then watch closely. You'll learn what it means to be Roman. Her words settle into you like a seed. To be Roman in this sense is to understand that the body is not merely flesh. It's a tool, a weapon, a canvas for politics and performance. And tonight in this room, every person is both artist and subject hunter and prey. One of the attendants approaches with a tray of small round cakes glazed in honey and sprinkled with crushed nuts. You take one, and the sweetness hits your tongue like a shock after the wine's spice. It's another deliberate pairing sugar to jolt the senses, to keep the night from softening too soon. The games continue, participants swapping shifting roles, sometimes stepping away to let others take their place. The line between audience and performer blurs until you can no longer tell who came here to watch and who came to be seen. In the far corner, you notice a group gathered around a low table, dice rattling in a shallow bowl. These are not ordinary wagers. The stakes here are favors, promises, perhaps even secrets. One man loses a throw and is immediately led away by the victor, the outcome clear without a word spoken. Another wins and demands a whispered vow from his opponent, sealing it with a clasp of hands. You realize this is not one night, but part of a chain of nights, each one feeding into the next. Alliances forged here may bear fruit weeks later in the Senate, in court, or in the streets. Ruin can come just as swiftly. The host returns to the platform, calling for the final round. His smile is relaxed, but his eyes are sharp, scanning the crowd as though he's marking who has impressed him and who has not. The participants take their places, and you understand that this last display will set the tone for whatever comes after, whether the night fades into private indulgences or erupts into something more dangerous. The music swells again, and the room leans forward. You don't yet know who will step into the center, but a part of you wonders if you're about to be called forward yourself. In Rome, the line between spectator and participant was always perilously thin. The host scans the crowd with the ease of a man who knows he owns every gaze in the room. His eyes pass over senators' sons, merchant princes, courtesans, draped in silk foreign envoys with eyes like sharpened steel, and then they settle unmistakably on you. The pause is long enough for the people around you to follow his gaze. Some smile faintly, others exchange glances. A few lean back as if to make space, already anticipating the spectacle. He extends his hand in invitation, but it's not a request. In Rome, such gestures are commands wrapped in velvet. Refusal would be remembered. Acceptance might be regretted. You rise legs steady despite the sudden rush of heat in your chest, and step forward into the open space at the center of the room. The marble floor beneath the rugs is cool, but you feel the warmth of every candle's flame, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on you. The host does not touch you. Instead, he motions to an attendant, who brings forward a shallow bronze bowl filled with folded slips of parchment. "The gods will decide your challenge," he says, his voice carrying easily. The bowl is held out, and you draw one at random. The parchment is smooth under your fingers, and when you unfold it, the words inside are simple yet loaded: provoker ad ludum, to provoke into the game. The crowd reacts with quiet approval. This is not a passive role. You are to choose someone and draw them into the contest using whatever means you see fit: words, gesture, touch, or trickery. It's a test of boldness, creativity, and instinct. Your mind races. Around you, the spectators lean in, eager to see who you'll select. There's the young man who has been laughing too loudly all night, trying to hide his nerves. The older matron whose sharp eyes miss nothing. The masked man who's been watching you since the evening began, or the woman with the elaborate hair whose smile suggests she's already imagined this moment. You choose her, not because she's the safest option, far from it, but because you sense she will turn the game into something no one else could. Stepping toward her, you extend your hand palm up. She doesn't take it immediately, letting the tension hang, the silence stretch. Then, with a glance that is almost a challenge, she rises and lets her fingers graze yours. The crowd shifts, murmuring. Together, you move to the center. The host steps back, signaling for the music to resume. The rhythm is slower now, more deliberate, each beat an invitation to act or to hesitate. The rules are unspoken but clear. You must engage her, and she must decide whether to yield or resist. Every choice will be judged not by fairness, but by how well it entertains. You begin with distance circling her, letting the space between you become a thread you can pull tighter at will. She watches you still and poised as though she has all the time in the world. When you finally step closer, it's not to touch her, but to let your voice reach her alone. They think I'm here to provoke you. I think you've been provoking me all night. Her laugh is low, dangerous. She answers without moving her lips, so only you can hear. Then show them you've learned something. The crowd can't hear the exchange, but they can see the shift, the way her head tilts, the way you lean in just enough to breach her space. There's a ripple of approval. She steps around you now, her silk gown whispering across the floor, her hand grazing your shoulder, then gone before you can catch it. It's a dance of advances and retreats, each one leaving the onlookers leaning forward. At one point, she produces the bronze chain you held earlier, slipping it into your palm, as if daring you to use it. The object feels heavier now, not in weight, but in implication. You could loop it around her wrist, pull her closer, claim a symbolic victory, but would the crowd admire that or see it as too obvious? In Rome, the art lay in suggestion, not in brute force. You choose instead to let it slide through your fingers, the metallic chime catching the music's rhythm, then hold it up between you as an unspoken offer. She takes the chain, twines it once around her own wrist, and steps forward until you feel the heat of her breath. The crowd exhales as one. This, they seem to say, is how the game should be played. The host's smile is small but satisfied. You've passed whatever unspoken test he set. The woman releases the chain, letting it fall to the floor with a soft clink, and steps back, bowing slightly as the music fades. You mirror her gesture, and the applause begins, not the raucous kind of the arena, but the measured approval of people who know they've just witnessed something worth remembering. You return to the edge of the room, the woman slipping away into the crowd without another glance. Already you hear whispers, beginning fragments of your name attached to tonight's events. In this city, even the smallest rumor could grow into legend or into a weapon. The host raises his cup again, this time inviting everyone to drink deeply. The games are over, at least for now, but the night itself is far from finished. Somewhere beyond these walls, the city sleeps, unaware of the currents being stirred here. Inside, the wine flows, the air thickens, and you feel the strange pull of Rome's most dangerous truth in this place. The line between pleasure and peril is always one breath away. The applause fades into the soft rustle of silk, the clink of bracelets, the shifting of bodies on cushions. The The host has withdrawn from the center, melting into the crowd, like a spider returning to the heart of its web. Conversations resume in low, intimate tones, bursts of laughter here, a sigh there. But beneath it all, you sense something else. The air feels heavier now, as if the evening has entered a different phase, one more dangerous than the staged games you've just witnessed. A servant appears at your elbow, offering a goblet of pale wine, not the dark, spiced vintage from earlier. You take a cautious sip. The taste is lighter floral, almost sweet, but it leaves a peculiar tingling on your lips. Rome's elite knew their way around substances that altered mood and perception. Some were meant to relax, others to embolden, and a few whispered about, in the Subura's back alleys, were meant to erode the barriers between desire and fear. The woman with the elaborate hair is nowhere in sight. For a moment, you wonder if she's gone, but then you catch a glimpse of her in the far corner, speaking with the masked man who's been watching you since the night began. Their heads are close together, the conversation too quiet to overhear. She glances in your direction almost absently, then turns back to him. The look sends a shiver down your spine, not because it's hostile, but because it isn't. It's unreadable. The host calls for the doors to be opened, and a wave of cooler night air sweeps through the chamber. The guests begin to move toward the inner garden, a peristylum surrounded by marble columns, its open sky revealing a scattering of stars. In the moonlight, the white stone glows faintly, and the air smells of roses and damp earth. The garden is not a retreat from the night's pleasures. It is merely another stage. Here the gatherings are smaller, more intimate. Two senators lean close over a carved bench, hands hidden in the folds of their togas. A pair of courtesans stroll slowly around the fountain, their bare feet silent on the tiles, pausing now and then to share a morsel of fruit. At the far end, a group reclines on rugs spread over the grass, passing a slender pipe between them, its smoke curling like ghostly ribbons into the darkness. The masked man approaches you at last. His voice, when he speaks, is low and steady. "You played well tonight," he says. "Better than most who are new to this." There's a pause, just long enough for you to realize he's waiting to see if you'll ask what he means. You don't. In Rome, asking the wrong question could be more dangerous than giving the wrong answer. He gestures toward the fountain, where a small group is gathered around a marble statue of a reclining satyr. The water trickles over the stone figure's shoulder into the pool below, where wine, not water, flows. Silver cups float lazily on the surface, ready to be plucked out. The guests there are engaged in a ritual of sorts. Each must drink from a cup and then tell a story, a truth or a falsehood so outrageous that it can't be easily distinguished from the other. One man claims to have seduced the wife of a foreign ambassador in the shadow of the Temple of Jupiter. Another woman describes luring her husband's political rival into an assignation only to leave him locked in a granary until the Senate vote was over. The crowd reacts with indulgent laughter, but you understand the deeper point in Rome's scandal could be both shield and sword, depending on how it was wielded. The masked man hands you a cup from the pool. The wine is cool and strangely fragrant. "Your turn," he says. Around you faces turn expectantly. You realize you're trapped not by force, but by the momentum of the night. If you say too little, you'll be dismissed as timid. If you say too much, you might arm someone with a story they'll reshape into something far more dangerous. You speak, choosing your words carefully, blending enough truth to make it believable, with enough invention to keep it distant from reality. The crowd's reaction is exactly what you hoped for, murmurs of appreciation, a few knowing smiles but no sharp questions. The masked man nods once as though you've passed another test you didn't know you were taking. The games in the garden shift again. A new circle forms beneath an olive tree where a pair of slaves kneel beside a table covered in small objects, rings, pins, bits of carved bone, scraps of silk. Guests are invited to choose one each item tied to a dare whispered by the slaves. Some dares are harmless, a kiss, a dance, but others are whispered with a glance toward the darker corners of the garden. When your turn comes, your hand hovers over a carved ivory clasp shaped like a seashell. You take it, and the slave leans close to whisper your dare. Bring the one you most desire to the statue of Venus before the candles are extinguished. You glance toward the statue at the garden's center, its base ringed with flickering lamps. Already some have been snuffed out by the breeze. You scan the crowd. The woman with the elaborate hair is gone again. The masked man is speaking to the host, both of them glancing toward you with unreadable expressions. The seconds are slipping away, the candles burning lower. You feel the familiar Roman pressure: make a choice now, or have the choice made for you. Somewhere in the darkness of the garden, a laugh rings out, low, inviting, and unmistakably hers. You follow the sound of her laugh moving through the half-lit garden as the night air brushes against your skin. The voices behind you fade into a muted backdrop of murmurs and the soft clink of cups. You pass under an arch of climbing roses, their scent sharp in the cool air, and find her standing by the statue of Venus. The goddess leans forward in her marble stillness, one hand clutching her drapery, the other extending toward the pool at her feet. The flicker of the remaining candles makes the stone seem alive, the folds of her robe shifting in the shadows. The woman with the elaborate hair is alone, or at least she seems to be. In Rome, you could never be sure. Eyes might be watching from the darkened colonnade, ears might be listening behind the hedges. She stands with her back to you, her hand trailing lazily through the water in the statue's basin. You found me, she says, without turning. Her voice is quiet, but it carries easily in the stillness. I had to, you reply. The candles are going out. She turns, then her gaze sliding to the ivory clasp still in your hand. A faint smile touches her lips. Ah, a dare. And you chose me. She says it like a statement, not a question, as though the outcome was inevitable. The last few candles sputter. You step closer, and she watches you the way a cat watches a bird, poised, patient, entirely certain of her advantage. Do you know, she says, why Venus is always shown in that pose, half covered, half revealed? You shake your head. Because that is the balance Rome understands best, what is shown and what is withheld. Every gesture, every touch, every word, all of it measured. Give too much and you're dismissed as cheap. Give too little and you're forgotten. She reaches for the clasp, her fingers brushing yours as she takes it. Without breaking eye contact, she lifts her other hand and presses the clasp into your hair, just above your ear. It's not a crown, not even a true ornament, just a token. Yet in this moment, under the watch of Venus and the dimming candles, it feels like a brand. last flame gutters out, leaving the garden in a silver wash of moonlight. The woman steps back, her silhouette framed by the marble goddess. The dare is done, she says, but the night isn't. She turns and walks toward the far edge of the garden, where a small arched doorway leads deeper into the villa. You follow your footsteps, soundless on the grass. Inside the passage is narrow and cool, the stone walls close on either side. You can hear the faint drip of water somewhere ahead, the air growing damper with each step. The corridor opens into a circular chamber you haven't seen before. At its center is a sunken pool, its surface rippling faintly from the trickle of water spilling in from a spout shaped like a dolphin. Oil lamps float on the water, their tiny flames swaying with the movement. The scent here is different, less floral, more mineral, touched with the faint tang of salt. This is where the host keeps his most private gatherings, she says. Few are invited, fewer still return. She doesn't elaborate on why some don't. Along the pool's edge, several people recline on low couches. Their robes are looser here, their posture more relaxed, but the same watchfulness lingers in their eyes. Conversations are murmured glances, exchanged, the air heavy with the kind of unspoken understanding you've felt all evening, that everything seen here will be carried away, reshaped, perhaps even weaponized. The woman guides you to a low couch near the water. A servant appears instantly, setting down a silver tray with 2 cups of steaming liquid. You lift yours, breathing in the scent of herbs bay perhaps, and something sharper you can't name. She leans closer, her shoulder brushing yours. "This will warm you and loosen your tongue," she says, then adds with a hint of amusement, "though I'm not sure you need help with that." From across the pool, the masked man watches. You wonder if he's following you or her, or if the two of you are simply caught in the same net. A ripple of movement draws your gaze to the far side of the chamber. The host himself has entered, but this time he's alone without attendants. He sheds his outer robe and steps down into the pool, the water lapping against his waist. Without speaking, he gestures for the guests to join him. The woman beside you doesn't hesitate. She rises, setting her cup aside, and steps into the water. She glances back at you, her expression unreadable in the lamplight. "Come," she says. "You've seen the games. Now you'll see what they lead to." You stand at the edge of the pool, the lamplight glimmering across the surface like molten bronze. The water is darker than you expected, opaque, concealing whatever lies beneath, and warm, almost too warm, as though it's been heated not just by the stone walls, but by the presence of so many bodies. The host watches you without speaking, his expression neither welcoming nor threatening, but something in between, a test you've been walking toward all night without knowing. You step in. The heat envelops your legs first, then your hips, then your chest. It's not the clean freshness of a public bath. It's heavier, tinged with the faint scent of oils and whatever herbal infusion lingers in the steam. When the water reaches your shoulders, it's like slipping into another world. The walls blur in the mist, and the echoes of movement replace the sounds of the villa above. Around you, others are already drifting toward the host. Some greet him with a touch to the hand or a brush of lips on his shoulder. Others keep a deliberate distance, circling like planets around a sun. The woman with the elaborate hair moves with the ease of someone who knows this ritual, gliding through the water until she's near him, exchanging a brief, murmured word you can't hear. The host raises his hand and silence falls. This he says, his voice low, but carrying over the ripples is the inner circle. Here, there are no wagers, no dares, no spectators. Here, there is only what you are willing to give and what you are prepared to take. He motions to an attendant on the pool's edge who lowers a small chest into the water. The lid is opened to reveal more objects, rings, chains, carved figurines, lengths of silk that drift like seaweed. These are not prizes. They're tokens, each one carrying meaning understood by those present. In this space, choosing a token is an unspoken declaration of intent. The guests begin selecting them. A man with broad shoulders takes a silver ring shaped like a serpent and slips it onto his finger. A young woman chooses a length of crimson silk and knots it loosely around her wrist. The woman with the elaborate hair retrieves a small carved ivory key and holds it aloft for a moment before tucking it into the fold of her gown. When the chest is held out to you, your hand hesitates above the objects. You feel the eyes of the group not all at once, but here and there, each glance a small weight pressing you toward a choice. Finally, you take a narrow bronze bracelet, etched with the image of two intertwined figures. The attendant nods as though this is an acceptable answer, and the chest is drawn away. The host turns and begins to move through the water, drawing the group into a slow circuit of the pool. It's not aimless. It's a procession, the kind you've seen in temples, but stripped of formality. The lapses between gestures, the glances, the half-smiles, each is loaded with intent. It's as though the entire pool is a conversation without words. At one point, the host stops before you, his gaze falling briefly to the bracelet on your wrist. You've chosen the path of binding, he says, and the words feel less like an observation and more like a prophecy. Then he moves on, leaving the thought to sink into you like a pebble dropped into deep water. The warmth of the pool begins to work on you, loosening your muscles, slowing your thoughts, making you aware of every ripple against your skin. The others drift closer in pairs and trios, some exchanging tokens, others simply letting the water carry them together. More than once, a brush of fingers against your arm feels deliberate, lingering, just long enough to register before disappearing into the mist. The woman with the elaborate hair finds you again. She traces the edge of the bracelet with one finger. Be careful, she says softly. Binding goes both ways. It can keep you safe, or keep you here. There's no time to ask what she means. The host is calling everyone toward the center. He dips his hands into the water and brings them up, cupped, letting the liquid spill back into the pool. Tonight, he says, we leave behind the masks of the outer world. There is no senate here, no marketplace, no forum. Only the truth of what you will do when nothing is forbidden. The words ripple outward, not just in sound, but in effect. Around you, the air shifts, shoulders relax, boundaries loosen, movements grow bolder. It's as though the night has been building to this single moment. And now the restraint that held everything in place begins to dissolve. Someone takes your hand, not the woman, not the host, but another guest whose face you barely noticed before. The grip is firm, steady, and you realize that here in this circle, the choice isn't entirely yours anymore. The current has you, and Rome doesn't let go. The hand holding yours doesn't release. It guides you through the warm, rippling water toward the farthest arc of the circular chamber, where the mist clings thickly against the stone. The other figures blur into silhouettes, their movements half hidden, their whispers swallowed by the soft slap of water against the pool's edge. Here away from the center, the air feels heavier, as though the heat itself has conspired to slow every breath, every thought. Your guide is a man, tall shoulders square, his face partly obscured by the shifting lamplight. His eyes are steady but not hostile. In Rome, that could mean anything. He releases your hand only when you're pressed close to the curved wall, the stone warm and slick beneath your fingers. The binding, he says, nodding toward your bronze bracelet, isn't always a promise you make to someone else. Sometimes it's what you allow them to make of you. Before you can answer, there's a movement behind him. The woman with the elaborate hair has joined you, her presence as sudden and seamless as if she had stepped out of the steam itself. She smiles not at him, but at you, and her hand trails briefly along your shoulder. "Be careful who interprets your choice," she murmurs. "It rarely matches what you intended." The man steps aside, yielding space between you and the wall, and the woman takes his place without asking. She leans close enough that you feel the heat of her breath against your ear. "This pool," she says, "isn't for bathing. It's for remembrance." What happens here is never spoken of directly, but it is always remembered, and not always kindly. You glance toward the host at the center of the chamber. He's moving slowly among the guests, speaking to some, touching others lightly on the arm or shoulder. Each gesture seems to seal some invisible bargain. It's clear now that this gathering is less about indulgence and more about the mapping of connections, who draws closer to whom, who avoids whose touch, who leaves with whose token. The woman's hand slips briefly into the water and comes up with your bronze bracelet in her palm. You didn't even feel her unfasten it. She turns it over once the metal glinting faintly in the lamplight, before sliding it back onto your wrist. Now she says softly, "You're bound twice. Once by your own hand, once by mine." The implication curls through you like the heat in the air, neither threat nor comfort, but something that could become either. A sudden ripple of laughter cuts through the chamber, drawing every eye to the opposite side of the pool. Two guests, both men, both clearly from noble houses, are locked in some kind of contest. One holds a length of silk, the other tries to seize it, and the water splashes high against the stone as they grapple. The host watches with mild amusement, but makes no move to intervene. In Rome, even disorder could be a kind of performance, so long as it served the night's unspoken ends. The man who first brought you here leans toward you again. "That will be remembered," he says, nodding toward the scuffle. "Tomorrow it will be told as a fight over honor, or over a lover, or over a debt. By the time the tale finishes its journey, no one will remember the truth, only the version that does the most damage." The woman smiles faintly at this, as though she's heard such games before. Then she steps back, her eyes still on you, and begins to drift toward the center of the pool. She doesn't beckon, but she doesn't need to. You follow. When you reach the center, the host is waiting. He gestures for you to join the circle forming around him. One by one, the guests hold out their tokens, rings, chains, lengths of silk, and place them into his open hands. You realize this is the closing ritual. Whatever has happened tonight, whatever connections have been made or unmade, will be symbolized here before the group disperses. When it's your turn, you hesitate. The bracelet feels heavier now, as if it's soaked up the weight of the night. Finally, you slip it off and place it into the host's palm. His fingers close around it, and for the first time his gaze softens slightly. Bindings, he says, are not broken when removed. They simply change form. The meaning lingers in your mind as the host sets your bracelet among the others. The water shifts around you as the circle breaks apart, the guests moving toward the steps that lead out of the pool. The night above still waits, whether it holds release, more intrigue, or something darker you can't yet tell. You climb the stone steps out of the pool, the water trailing from your skin in warm rivulets, the air outside the chamber cooler, but no less heavy. A servant is waiting with a length of fine linen which you wrap around yourself. The fabric is soft, almost translucent, clinging slightly where it meets damp skin. In Rome, even the simplest gesture covering the body could be made into something suggestive, and you feel the weight of glances as other guests ascend the steps behind you. The corridor beyond the chamber is narrow and dim, its oil lamps set low in recessed niches. You follow the gentle slope upward, feeling the change in air less humid now, tinged with the faint aroma of roasted nuts and honey. Somewhere above, music drifts faintly different from before, slower, more melodic, the sound of strings rather than pipes. The villa is vast, and you realize the night has been designed to move you through it, like a labyrinth, each chamber a different snare. The woman with the elaborate hair appears ahead of you, already dressed again, in her silk stola, her hair retied, but slightly looser than when you first saw her. She doesn't stop, but glances over her shoulder, just long enough to say, "Keep walking." If you linger in the passage, they'll think you're avoiding someone, and that can be more dangerous than seeking them. You emerge into another courtyard smaller than the first, enclosed on all sides by colonnades. The moonlight spills in, silvering the mosaic floor, a scene of Leda and the Swan, a story of seduction disguised as divine will. A few guests stand here in pairs or trios, speaking in low tones. Some hold small plates of sugared almonds or spiced figs. This is the re-entry point, the place where the deeper rites below give way to the more public face of the gathering. The host is here too, speaking with a man draped in a richly patterned cloak. Their conversation halts briefly as you pass their eyes following you, not with open hostility, but with the careful assessment that's more unnerving than any glare. In Rome, you could never tell if a glance was measuring you for friendship, for opportunity, or for the knife. A servant offers you a cup of warm milk steeped with honey and poppy seeds. It's soothing on the tongue, almost lulling, but you've been in the city long enough to know that such drinks can be used to loosen memory, to blur the edges of recollection. Perhaps it's meant as a kindness after the heat of the pool. Perhaps it's meant to ensure certain details of tonight will be unreliable when retold. The masked man reappears, moving like a shadow to your side. "You gave the bracelet back," he says quietly, as though it's a fact worth remarking on. "Wise. But remember, the person who bound you may not consider it undone." His gaze flicks briefly toward the woman who is now speaking with two other guests under the colonnade. You can't read her expression from here, but you sense that she knows you're watching. The courtyard doors open, and the sound of the larger hall returns a hum of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. The air is warmer there, thicker with the mingled scents of wine and burning myrrh. You step back into it, the shift almost disorienting after the cool intimacy of the hidden chamber. Here the crowd is different. Some faces are new arrivals who weren't part of the earlier rituals. They move with an energy that's almost jarring compared to the measured pace of the inner circles. The games here are simpler dice on low tables, cups refilled as quickly as they're emptied, flirtations carried out in plain sight. But even here, there's an undercurrent. Every smile is an opening, every wager a chance to bind someone to a promise they didn't know they were making. The woman drifts back into your orbit now, laughing at something the host has said. She catches your eye for the briefest moment and raises her cup, a gesture that could mean acknowledgement or warning. In the center of the hall, musicians begin a new song, brighter, quicker, pulling people toward the open space to dance. You're urged forward by a pair of strangers, each taking one of your hands and drawing you into the movement. The steps are simple, but the closeness is deliberate. The kind of dance that lets fingertips brush, that makes breath mingle. Around you, the floor fills with shifting pairs, partners changing without pause, as if the night itself refuses to let anyone stay with one person for too long. As you turn, you catch sight of the host watching from his couch, his gaze sharp despite the easy smile on his lips. You realize the dance isn't for the guests, it's for him. He's watching how people move toward and away from each other, who lingers, who avoids, who seeks. It's another game, another form of the same Roman practice, turning intimacy into currency. And you're part of it, whether you meant to be or not. The song ends not with a flourish, but with a gentle slowing of the rhythm, the musicians letting the final notes dissolve into the hum of conversation. Partners step back from one another, bowing or exchanging murmured thanks, though more than a few pairs hold their gaze a beat too long before parting. You feel the warmth of the dance still in your limbs, but also the subtle shift in the room's attention, like the collective inhale before something changes. The host rises. The movement is unhurried, yet it draws every eye without effort. He takes a step toward the center of the floor, and the crowd instinctively gives him space. My friends, he begins, his voice low enough that people have to pin in. To catch each word, the hour grows late. And as you know, that is when truth becomes impatient. A ripple of amusement passes through the hall, but there's an edge beneath it. He motions to a servant who brings forward a shallow wooden tray lined with small wax tablets. Each tablet is paired with a slender stylus of bone. Write something, the host says. A confession, a wish, a truth, a lie, so long as it is worth hearing. The rules are simple, but in Rome nothing is simple. Every person here understands that whatever is written will be read aloud by someone else before the night is over. The danger isn't only in what you reveal, it's in what others can claim you revealed. You take a tablet, the smooth wax faintly warm from the heat of the room. Around you, the scratching of styluses begins. Some guests write quickly, others pause in long stillness before committing a single word. You can feel the weight of the decision pressing on you. A true confession might grant you a strange kind of protection, vulnerability turned into spectacle, but it might also be used against you. A lie, if too wild, could make you a target of ridicule. You write something balanced on the knife's edge, true enough to be convincing, ambiguous enough to be denied if needed. When you place the tablet back onto the tray, the masked man's hand briefly touches yours. Careful, he murmurs. Sometimes the lie is more dangerous than the truth. The tray makes its way to the host, who begins to read the tablets aloud one by one. Some draw laughter, a boast about a stolen kiss in the Senate's shadow, a claim of having swum naked in the Tiber during a winter freeze. Others draw a more hushed reaction, confessions of betrayal of debts, unpaid of favors traded for unnamed pleasures. When your tablet is read, the room stills for half a heartbeat. The host's voice is smooth, but you catch the faintest flicker in his eyes. Whatever you've written has landed perhaps with him, perhaps with someone else. You hear a soft chuckle from the woman with the elaborate hair. She doesn't look at you, but her amusement is unmistakable. Once the last tablet is read, the host sets the tray aside. Now he says we match the hand to the words. The crowd shifts, scanning one another, testing glances, measuring reactions. This is the true game, unmasking not the face, but the intent. A senator's wife correctly names the young man who claimed to have seduced a rival's mistress. A merchant is accused wrongly, it seems, of boasting about a bribe to a temple priest. When accusations are right, there is applause. When wrong, there is laughter. Either way, reputations are nudged, twisted, reshaped. The woman with the elaborate hair approaches you slowly, weaving between guests, until she stands close enough for her perfume to cut through the incense in the air. "That was dangerous," she says softly, "but I liked it." She doesn't say what she thinks you wrote, only that she's filed it away. The host claps once, breaking the tension. "Enough for tonight," he says. "The rest will be settled elsewhere." The words hang in the air, as much promise as threat. Conversations resume, though now they're sharper, more deliberate. The night has shifted again, not toward games, but toward whatever private bargains will follow. As you stand there, you realize the most perilous moments of the evening are still to come, not in the games or the rituals, but in the quiet exchanges, when the crowd thins, when the wrong person might find you alone in a corridor. And somewhere in the press of voices and movement, the woman's laughter returns low, knowing, and this time much closer. You catch the sound of her laughter again, threading through the hum of the hall like a silk ribbon. This time, you don't hesitate. You weave through the crowd, sidestepping a pair of guests deep in negotiation over some future favor, brushing past a servant, balancing a tray of spiced wine, until you find her in the shadow of a colonnade. She's speaking with a man in a deep blue toga, his posture deferential despite the richness of his clothes. When she sees you, she tilts her head in acknowledgement, but doesn't stop her conversation. Her eyes linger on you while her lips form words meant for the man, an exercise in divided attention, so artful it feels like a challenge. You wait. In Rome, knowing when to stand still is as much a skill as knowing when to move. Finally, she dismisses him with a touch to his sleeve. He bows slightly and withdraws, disappearing into the hall. She turns to you fully now, the faint smile on her lips, both greeting and assessment. "You're still here," she says. "You sound surprised." "I'm not. Most leave before this part of the night." She leads you along the colonnade, away from the hall's heat and noise, into a smaller antechamber, lit only by a single oil lamp. The flame throws long, flickering shadows across the frescoes. Figures from myth, frozen mid-embrace, their faces serene, even in moments of violence. The air here is cooler, but thick with the scent of aged wood and old incense. This is where the real bargains are struck, she says, leaning against the wall. No audience, no games, just two people deciding what tomorrow will remember about them. Her gaze is steady, almost uncomfortably so. So what will tomorrow remember about you? You're not sure if she's offering opportunity or warning. Perhaps both. That depends, you say, on who's doing the remembering. She laughs again, softer this time, and steps closer. A wise answer. But wisdom is worth nothing if it's never tested. She reaches into the folds of her gown and draws out the ivory key she took from the pool earlier. Do you know what this opens? You shake your head. It opens a room no one is invited to without the host's blessing. And yet, she places the key in your palm, her fingers brushing yours. He hasn't stopped me from taking it. Which means either he wants me to open that door, or he wants to see what happens when I do, when her hand lingers a moment longer, then withdraws. Come with me or don't. But if you do, you'll be in a part of Rome most people never even imagine. You follow her back into the corridor, the key warm from her touch. The path she takes is unfamiliar, past storerooms and side passages through a narrow staircase that twists downward. The sounds of the main hall fade until you hear only your own footsteps and the distant trickle of water. At the bottom, the passage opens into a small, heavy-doored chamber of dark cedar. She fits the ivory key into the lock, and the mechanism turns with a muted click. The door swings inward to reveal a space so different from the rest of the villa. It feels like stepping into another world. The room is small, circular, its walls lined with shelves holding scrolls, wax tablets, and clay seals. A single table stands in the center, and on it an open ledger glows faintly in the lamplight. You realize almost immediately what you're looking at records. Not of trade or property, but of people, names, dates, debts, favors, liaisons. A catalog of leverage. This, she says, stepping inside, is the real currency of Rome. Bodies are fleeting. Stories endure. And here she gestures to the shelves are the stories that can ruin or save anyone in that hall upstairs. You glance at the open ledger. Several names you recognize leap from the page, each followed by terse notes. Some are clear O's 3 months' rent, caught with senator's wife. Others are in code you can't yet decipher. She looks at you, her expression unreadable. You could take a name from here and make yourself untouchable, or make someone else disappear from power entirely. But once you take it, you can never give it back. The key is still warm in your palm. You understand now that this is not just about desire or pleasure. It's about choosing which kind of danger you're willing to own. You stand at the table, the open ledger before you, the inked lines stark and deliberate under the lamplight. The woman with the elaborate hair doesn't speak. She just watches you, her silence urging a decision without pressing it. The air feels tighter here, as though the walls themselves lean in to listen. Your fingers hover above the page. The names are neatly arranged, each one a life condensed to a line or two. Beside some, the notes are trivial, petty debts, indiscretions, whispered through market stalls. Beside others, the words are sharp as blades plotted against the consul, bribed the temple priest, betrayed the oath of Saturnalia. The temptation is obvious. To take a name from here is to hold power in your pocket, to carry a weapon no sword could match. In Rome, such knowledge could shield you, raise you, even save your life. But it could also make you a target, because possession of a secret is an open invitation for someone else to silence you. The woman moves closer, her shadow spilling across the page. If you take one, she says quietly, it means you've chosen to be part of the game forever. There's no stepping back to the safety of ignorance. You glance up, and if I don't... She smiles faintly, but there's no warmth in it. Then you're already playing. You just won't know the rules until it's too late. You scan the page again, and your eyes stop on a name you know, someone whose hand you shook earlier in the night. Someone who smiled at you as though you were of no consequence. The note beside it is brief, but it's enough to change everything. Debtor to the Praetorian Guard, unpaid. A dangerous debt in dangerous hands. You could copy it onto your memory, walk away with nothing but the knowledge. Or you could take the page itself, ensuring the proof can't be altered or denied. But taking it would be obvious. The missing page would be noticed. You realize the real art here is in remembering without leaving a mark. The woman steps to another shelf, running her fingers along a row of sealed tablets. These, she says, hold the older stories. Some so old that those named have been dead for decades, but their bloodlines aren't. She lifts one and places it in your hand. The seal bears the image of a laurel wreath. Sometimes the past can ruin the present more efficiently than the present can ruin itself. You set the tablet back, feeling the weight of it even after it's gone from your hand. She closes the ledger with deliberate care and turns the key in the lock of the room's only cabinet, securing the other volumes. You've seen enough, she says. Now you have to decide whether to pretend you haven't. As you leave the chamber, the coolness of the stone stairway is a shock after the close air below. Each step upward feels heavier, the villa above no longer just a place of music and wine, but the surface of something far deeper, far darker. When you emerge into the hall again, nothing has visibly changed. Guests still mingle, the musicians still play, the servants still glide through the crowd. And yet you feel different, aware now that every person here is not just flesh and voice, but a ledger entry waiting to be read by the right eyes. The woman doesn't walk beside you. She's already vanished back into the currents of the night, leaving you with the faint scent of her perfume and the image of that ledger burned into your mind. The masked man passes close, so close his shoulder brushes yours. You've been downstairs, he says softly, without turning his head. Be careful. The ones who come back are the ones we all start watching. His words cling to you as the night continues. The games upstairs suddenly feeling like surface ripples on a much deeper sea. And somewhere beyond the laughter and the music, you can still hear the slow turning of a key in a lock. The awareness of that ledger changes everything. You move through the hall as before, but now each face you pass is layered with possibility. That senator at the dice table does, his name appear beside some whispered scandal, the merchant boasting of his caravans. How much of his wealth is borrowed from someone he dare not cross, even the host lounging with easy grace? What debts are hidden under that smile? The music swells again, a brighter tune meant to disguise the thinning crowd. Some guests slip away quietly, cloaked against the cool night. Others drift toward the smaller side rooms for conversations they don't want overheard. You stay in the main hall, your cup untouched, watching. You're no longer just a guest. You're a reader of signs, scanning for the unguarded gesture, the too quick glance that hints at something worth remembering. The woman with the elaborate hair appears briefly across the room, speaking to a young man whose nervous laughter betrays him. She touches his arm, says something low, then leaves him staring into the middle distance, as if he's just realized the cost of the bargain he made. She sees you watching, and for a moment, her smile is exactly the same as when she handed you the key, knowing deliberate, as if this is all another step in a plan you've only just joined. The masked man sidles close again, though this time he doesn't speak right away. He simply stands beside you, eyes following the same movements you're tracking. You understand now, he says at last. It's not the games. It's never the games. It's who's watching while they're played. Before you can answer, the host claps his hands once, calling for attention. The hall quiets instantly, all eyes turning to him. My friends, he says, the hour is almost upon us when the streets grow still and the Tiber holds the moon in its current. It's time for the parting ritual. Servants enter carrying trays of small clay lamps, each no bigger than a cupped hand, a single wick protruding. One by one, the guests take a lamp lighted from the central brazier and place it on the floor in a winding path that curls toward the open doors. The effect is hypnotic, tiny flames marking a route into the night, each one a silent farewell. When your turn comes, the servant offers you a lamp and a lit taper. You take it, kneel, and touch the flame to the wick. The light flares briefly, then steadies, throwing your shadow long against the marble. You set the lamp down in its place and rise, feeling the warmth still in your fingertips. As the path of lamps grows, guests begin to leave, some pausing to exchange a last word, others slipping away without acknowledgement. You spot the woman again, near the doors, her lamp already placed, speaking to the host in low tones. His gaze flicks toward you once before returning to her. You can't tell if you've just been mentioned or measured. The masked man leaves without ceremony, his departure marked only by the faint sound of sandals against stone. Others follow the hall, emptying in slow waves. When you reach the doorway, the host is there, offering a parting smile. Every night writes its own story, he says, but some carry their pages longer than others. I think you will. Outside, the cool night air is a shock after the warmth within. The path of lamps winds into the courtyard, their light catching the edges of the columns and the glint of water in the fountain. The gates stand open, the city beyond, cloaked in the quiet just before dawn. You pause, glancing back once at the villa. Through the open doors, you see the woman with the elaborate hair still inside, watching you with that same unreadable expression. She doesn't move, doesn't speak, just watches as if to remind you that Rome remembers whether you want it to or not. And then you step into the darkness, the sound of your footsteps merging with the silent city. The street outside the villa is narrow, paved in uneven stone that glistens faintly in the light of the remaining oil lamps. Somewhere in the distance, a cart creaks over the paving, the muffled clop of hooves echoing between shuttered shops. Rome at this hour feels almost deserted, yet you know better. The city never truly sleeps, it only changes its mask. You walk slowly, letting your eyes adjust to the darkness. Behind you, the gates of the villa close with a muted thud. The sound is final, and it carries more weight than it should, as though you've just stepped across an invisible line. Whatever happened inside is now part of the city's bloodstream, and you are carrying it with you. The first shadow detaches itself from the mouth of an alley ahead, a figure leaning casually against a column. The torchlight catches the edge of his cloak, revealing a deep blue fabric you recognize from earlier in the night. It's the man the woman was speaking to before she gave you the key. He straightens as you approach. "You're new," he says simply. His tone isn't hostile, but it's not welcoming either. New people make mistakes. You pause, keeping your voice level. And old ones don't. He smiles faintly, as though you've passed a small test. Old ones make them differently, quieter, with more precision. He steps aside, letting you pass, but his parting words follow you. Whatever you took from that villa tonight, seen or unseen, it's now part of you. Don't think you can leave it behind. The streets open into a wider forum, the moonlight spilling over empty stalls and the skeletal frames of market awnings. The smell of baked bread drifts from a bakery already firing its ovens for the morning. You pause, realizing how far you've come from the heat and shadows of the villa, yet the sense of being observed hasn't faded. You turn sharply, scanning the rooftops, the arcades, the recessed doorways. At first, nothing. Then a flicker of movement on the far side of the square. A figure cloaked in pale fabric, watching from beneath the arch of a temple portico. Even at this distance, you know it's her. The woman with the elaborate hair. She doesn't move toward you, doesn't call out. She just stands there, letting the silence fill the space between you. Finally, she turns and disappears into the temple's shadow, leaving only the echo of your own breathing in the empty square. You keep walking, past the darkened insulae where the city's poorer citizens sleep, past the faint torchlight of a patrol that doesn't give you more than a glance. The night is thinning now, the stars paling the horizon tinged faintly with the first hint of dawn. When you reach your own doorway, you pause with your hand on the latch. The villa feels a lifetime away, yet the images are still sharp. The pool's heat, the glow of the ledger, the way the host's eyes measured you as though fitting you into some larger plan. And beneath it all, the sense that you have not left that night behind, you've only carried it into a new one. Inside the room is cool and still. You pour water from a jug into a shallow basin, splash it over your face, and watch the ripples in the lamplight. For a moment, you almost believe you can wash away the taste of wine, the scent of incense, the weight of the bracelet that is no longer on your wrist. But you know better. In Rome, what happens in the dark doesn't fade with the sunrise. It lingers, passed from mouth to mouth, from one careful whisper to another, reshaped until it is no longer yours to control. And somewhere, perhaps in the villa, perhaps in the streets, a certain woman is already telling her version of tonight. The city is quiet now, the first light of morning, brushing the highest rooftops with pale gold. You've made it through the night, though. Through feels like the wrong word, because in truth, the night has only carried you further in. What happened in those rooms, in those gardens, in the heat of that hidden pool, will ripple outward in ways you cannot yet see. Some threads will tighten, others will snap. And you, whether you meant to or not, are now part of that weave. You think of the faces, the host's calm authority, the masked man's sharp glances, the woman's layered smiles. You think of the ledger, its neat lines holding the rise or ruin of names you now know. You think of the path of lamps winding into the night, each flame a silent farewell, each one a reminder that every ending in Rome is also a beginning for some new intrigue. In the stillness of your own space, the city seems far away, but you know it's not. Behind closed shutters, deals are being struck, whispers, traded plans set in motion. Some of those plans may already have your name in them. For now, there is nothing to do but breathe and let your body sink into the quiet after so much watching, listening, and choosing. You've learned something about Rome tonight, not the Rome carved in stone or written in history, but the Rome that breathes in its hidden corners, that measures power in touches, glances, and secrets. Close your eyes. Let the lingering incense fade. Let the imagined sound of water on marble drift away. You can leave the games for tomorrow. Tonight, this long, intricate night is done. And for now, you are still here,